Hi guys, welcome to EduMate e-learning by Mrityunjay Khare, and today's subject will be English, and today's poem is Abandoned Farmhouse, that is written by Ted Kooser. So we will now speak about Ted Kooser, who was an American poet. Theodore J. Kooser, born on 25th April 1939, is an American poet. He served as a poet laureate consultant in the Poetry Library to the Congress from 2004 to 2006 and won the 2005 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry for his book Delights and Shadows. Kooser began writing poetry while still a teenager. During the 35 years of his work in an insurance company, Kooser wrote poems each morning before he went to the office. He is the author of 12 collections of the poetry. His poetry displays his preoccupation with the past. His subjects are chosen from the everyday world and he expresses himself in simple languages drawn from the common speech. Considered by many to be among the best poets of his generation, Kooser was named Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry, as I spoke a few seconds before. Retired now, he travels to conduct workshops and poetry readings. He started a free weekly newspaper column, American Life in Poetry, which is published in over 150 newspapers online and introduces the works of contemporary American poets. Now we will be reading the text of the poem and will be explaining the paras in different slides. He was a big man, says the size of his shoes, on a pile of broken dishes by the house. A tall man too, says the length of the bed in an upstairs room, and a good, God-fearing man, says the Bible with a broken back. On the floor below the window, dusty with sun, but not a man for farming, says the field, cluttered with boulders and leaky barn. So the explanation of this para 1 is that the poem needs us to understand that the biggest family member lived in that farmhouse was a big man, and he realizes that this line by just seeing the size of his shoes, which were on a pile of broken dishes by the house. A tall man too. He realizes that if he was a tall man too by just realizing that his bed is very tall. And a good God-fearing man. He just realizes that the Bible with the broken cover says that the man was religious and he used that Bible to just worship the God he believed in. On the floor below the window, dusty with sun, which was with the Bible. The poet is talking about the Bible, which was lying below the window, dusty with sun. And he also tells us that he was not a man for farming. Because the fields that he that were just beside the farmhouse were cluttered with boulders and leaky barn. Now the explanation of second para I will be telling, but first the text. A woman lived with him, says the bedroom wall, papered with lilacs and the kitchen shelves, covered with oilcloth, and they had a child, says the sandbox made of a tractor tire. Money was scarce, says the jar of plum preserves, and canned tomatoes sealed in the cellar hole. And the winter's cold, say the rags in the window frames. It was lonely here, says the narrow country road. Now this second para is based on that a woman also lived with him. That the biggest family member in the house. With him a woman lived, says the bedroom wall. But how the bedroom wall says it? The poet tells us that the bedroom wall was papered with lilacs and kitchen shelves. Now, what are lilacs? Lilacs is a pinkish violet ornamental flower. So it was papered with lilacs. So you can say a wallpaper of lilacs, and the kitchen shelves also, and oil covered with oilcloth. Covered with oilcloth. What is oilcloth? Oilcloth is a waterproof tablecloth or shelf covering. And they had a child. This is the sandbox made from a tractor tire. So, so the poet also tells us that they had a child, which is being spoken from the sandbox made of a tractor tire. Money was scarce. Scarce means that they were poor. They had nothing to do in that farmhouse, and their life was of sorrow. And this is personified from the jars of plum preserves. Plum preserves were jams made of fruits and sugar. So the jars of the plum preserves say, because as you realize it, we save a thing to that because we don't have it usually. We don't have it usually. We don't make it usually. So says the jars of the plum preserves, and canned tomatoes sealed in a cellar hole. Canned tomatoes also, like we have tomatoes open. We use them every day, but because we just buy them from the market, we have money for that, and they had no money. The poet tells us this, like that they had no money. Because they had canned tomatoes sealed in the cellar hole. Cellar hole is a basement hole. And the winter's cold, say the rags in the window frames. The poet also tells us that the rags in the window frame tell us that also the winter cold was lonely here, says the narrow country road. He tells us that the farmhouse has been has a family which has this type of life by sorrow, poverty, and then abandonment also. As you can see, the farmhouse is abandoned. So now the last para, or you can say para 3, that the text of the para. Something went wrong, says the empty house in the weed-choked yard. Stones in the field say he was not a farmer. The sealed jars in the cellar say she left in a nervous haste. And the child, its toys are strewn in the yard, like branches after a storm, a rubber cow, a rusty tractor with a broken plow, a doll in overalls. Something went wrong, they say. Now in the third para, poet tells us that something went wrong, says the empty house. The empty house personifies that there was something wrong, in which the family left the farmhouse and it was abandoned. In the weed-choked yard also, you can say. The weed-choked yard means that weeds are that type of plants which are not needed in the growth of the plants. They just take the nutrition of plants and fulfill their needs, and the plants begin to die. So weed-choked yards. Something went wrong there. So that was like the empty house personifies that something went wrong and the family left the farmhouse. Stones in the field say he was not a farmer. The weed-choked yards and the stones in the field say that he was not a farmer. And this was also written in the first paragraph, which was like, but not a man for farming, says the fields cluttered with boulders and leaky barn. That is the same meaning in this line of the para 1. And the sealed jars say in the cellar says she left in a nervous haste. Now the poet means by this, like the still sealed jars personify that the woman lived in the farmhouse, left in a nervous haste, and the child, And the poet also tells us that child has also left. What about the child? This the line is just personifying that. What the child? The child's toys are strewn. Strewn means scattered about carelessly. So the toys are strewn in the yard, like the branches after a storm. As you observe after a storm, the branches of the trees are broken by its by the tree and are just and they fall down on the ground. Same as that, same as the toys, they are just lying around the farmhouse, and the toys are also personified in this line of the child, that a rubber plow or rusty tractor with a broken plow. These are the toys that the poet is talking about. Something went wrong, they say. Now, in the third para, in all over, the poet means that something went wrong and the farmhouse was abandoned. Now, the central idea of this poem is that that the poem is about the representative of tragedy and sorrow. The central idea of the poem is sorrow, poverty, and abandonment. It is a short central idea of this poem. Now I will be just speaking about the poetic devices. So the first is assonance. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds in the same line. Example, the sound of letter I in "A woman lived with him," says the bedroom wall. You can say lived with him. The sound of I is repeating in these three words. Like you can say li, vi, he. Lived with him. So this was the poetic device assonance, in which the sound of letter I is coming. And another example of this is the sound of vowel O in a doll with overall. Something went wrong, they say. You can say that a doll overall, or overall also. Overall in the line overall, in the word overall, the vowel is A, but still we pronounce it as O, so it will be vowel O, and it will be an assonance. And we can also say that something went wrong, they say. We can say something and wrong, because some and wrong, they have vowel O in the sound. Now the second, as you can see on the screen, is alliteration. Now the alliteration, you can say, is a type of assonance, but assonance is the repetition of the vowel and alliteration is the repetition of consonant. So alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds in the same line in quick succession. Like you can say repetition of the consonant B in, says, the Bible with a broken back. Bible with a broken back. Bible, B of Bible, B of broken, and B of back. This is the alliteration. One example of alliteration. Now the third, now the third poetic device, as you can see on the screen, is enjambment. Now what is this poetic device? This poetic device is defined as a verse that does not come at the end of the line. Instead, it continues to next line. For example, in this paragraph, you can say from the first line, he was a big man, says the size of his shoes, on a pile of broken dishes by the house. Now you see here that these two lines are combined. But as we say these lines are broken into some different lines, because see, shoes on pile of broken dishes. you can clearly see here that shoes are written differently by the second line. So these are the continuous line. We can write them in one line also, but the poet has used enjambment, so he could just clearly support the paragraph. Now we will study about imagery. So what is imagery? First, imagery is used to make readers perceive things involving their five senses. Example, in the wheat choked yard, stones in the field. This is the imagery that is used by the poet, so the reader can just sense them. The wheat choked yard, the stones in the field. The reader can just sense them and observe that how the poet is telling the poem in a different manner. And the second line is, as you know, the first line of the poem. He was a big man, says the size of his shoes. This can also be sensed by the readers. And the second paragraph, first line, we can also say, a woman lived with him, says the bedroom wall. So this is like this can also be sensed by imagery. Something went wrong, says the empty house. This can also be used. Now, as you can see on your screen, the fifth poetic device is simile. Simile is a device used to compare a person or an object with something else to make the meaning clear to the readers. Now, here as the example is that toys are compared to the branches of a last stanza. Like the line was, and the child, its toys are strewn in the yard. Wait, you can just this one, and the child, its toys are strewn in the yard. Now this line tells us that strewn in the yard and like branches after a storm. Till here we see that we get a simile between toys and the branches after a storm. The poet compares these two objects. Now the sixth and the last poetic device, as you can see on the screen, is personification. Now I tell you before I reading the definition that personification is the main poetic device used in the poem, in the whole poem. Now I will read it. Personification is a type of metaphor and common literary tool. It is when you assign the qualities of a person to something that isn't human or that isn't even alive, such as nature or household items. Work through these personification examples to see how well you understand the concept. Now, by understanding the concept, we mean like you can clearly see here. In the first para, he was a big man, says the size of his shoes. Now, the size of his shoes says it, but the shoes are not alive. As you know, the shoes are not alive; they are non-living things. So personification is based on that only. The non-living things are compared to the living things also. And that's a great this poem is a great example of personification. The poem is full of personification where an object or the thing takes a human characteristics. So from the onset, the reader finds the shoes, the bed, the Bible, the fields, and so on all become the voices of those real people who are now absent. So thank you for watching this video. Hope you like this video. If this video is comfortable with you and if this is knowledgeable to you, please like this video, share this video to your neighbors and friends, and don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to hit that bell icon. See you in the next video.